Kia ora everyone, and thanks for coming out tonight. So I'm going to talk about the epidemiology research program that we have at NZBRI. It's been going for about 8 years or more now, and much of the research that I will be talking about tonight has been funded by the Neurological Foundation of New Zealand and also Brain Research New Zealand. It's also not work that I've completed on my own, and I must acknowledge the contributions of my colleagues, in particular Daniel Mile, who's responsible for the data wrangling and the statistical models that I'll be showing you, and also Michael McCaskill and Tim Anderson for their continued inputs over the years. Our research program uses the National Health databases. We primarily use information on medication use, but we also integrate information on diagnoses when it is available. This figure here shows us the incidence of Parkinson's in New Zealand, and the incidence is the rate of new cases each year. The timeline here is between 2006 and 2019, and when you convert that rate into actual numbers, we can expect to see around 1,300 new cases of Parkinson's in New Zealand each year. And when we consider the total number of people who actually are living with the disorder, not just the new cases, we can say that currently we have close to 12,000 New Zealanders living with Parkinson's. Quite surprisingly, the incidence in New Zealand is showing a slight decline in the most recent years, and you can see that by looking at the middle line on the graph indicated by the circles. We will have to keep tracking this in the coming years to see if this trend continues, and if it does, I think we can safely say that there has been a true change in the incidence. The cause for that, however, it will be a little bit more difficult to work out. Once we have these national numbers, we're also able to divide our population into groups of interest. So on this figure, we can also see the incidence for males, that's the top line indicated with the squares, and also females, the bottom line indicated by the triangles. And this shows what is quite a well-described difference between the sexes. So we do expect to see more males than females with Parkinson's disease. Although I will note that not all countries report this in their population, and that perhaps indicates that these differences are due to differences in exposures to risk factors for Parkinson's disease rather than biology per se. This figure shows us the age distribution of people at the time of diagnosis. It indicates that the risk of getting Parkinson's disease does not continue to increase with increasing age. But we do have a window of greatest risk, and that is between 60 and 85 years of age. Overall, the average age at diagnosis is 76 years. We have also been able to look at the distribution of Parkinson's across our major ethnic groups. And here you can see that the European or Pākehā group are the ones that are mainly affected, and that's indicated by the red line. And we note that Māori are least affected, and that's indicated by the purple line. These figures here have been standardised so that the differences in life expectancy between the ethnic groups are largely taken care of, so that is not explaining this difference. Overall, differences between ethnic groups aren't particularly well understood. It could be due to differences in genetic risk factors or perhaps exposures to non-genetic risk factors. So explaining the differences that we're seeing in the New Zealand population is still going to take a little bit more time to work out what's actually at play here. We have also been able to look at the regional differences or regional distribution of Parkinson's within New Zealand. And this plot here indicates the numbers of people by using the DHB regions, so perhaps not quite so valid given we've just ditched the DHBs. But one thing to note is that all the South Island DHBs are at the top of that list. They're in the top half of the list when they're ranked by their prevalence, so that's indicating the number of people with the disorder. Again, Why is that? I don't know. It could mean that for some reason, living in the South Island, people are exposed more to some of these risk factors than people living in the North Island. Which one? I'll leave you to work that one out. We've also been able to use these national database information and combine it with information that we gather from our local research cohort. And we've done this to determine the number of people who have Parkinson's dementia. So Campbell has talked a lot about dementia. We do know that a number of people with Parkinson's will go on to develop dementia. It is a little bit different to Alzheimer's dementia in that often it will present with problems with perhaps your speed of your thinking and your decision making, whereas Alzheimer's might be more characteristic with memory loss and language problems. So we can take our prevalence curve, so that's the number of people, and we can combine it with information that we know from our local cohort in terms of how long people have remained dementia-free. And we've been able to determine that there is roughly 3,400 people with Parkinson's dementia in New Zealand, and that's around about a third of the total Parkinson's population. There are medications available to treat the symptoms of dementia, and work by Christina Pike, our PhD student, has indicated that people with Parkinson's dementia have higher rates of treatment with these medications compared to other types of dementia. We've also been able to add in a third piece of information, and that is the age at death. And effectively, if we combine all three pieces of information, we can estimate the risk of someone with Parkinson's going on to develop dementia. And that is what we call a lifetime risk, and that is, our estimate is about 56%. So someone who is diagnosed with Parkinson's disease will have a 56% chance of developing dementia. So it indicates that dementia is not a definitive outcome of the disorder, and it's much lower than previous research has indicated. So just stepping away from the plots, this slide just shows some famous faces who have publicly announced that they have Parkinson's disease. I think it illustrates quite well the range of people who get Parkinson's, and I think the answer there is anyone can get Parkinson's. The interesting thing is we're not really able to tell any one individual why they have developed the disease. The exception would be if genetic causes have been able to be identified, but that would really only be true for maybe 10 or 12% of the cases. So most people with Parkinson's will never know why they get it. In a broad sense, we know that there are genetic risk factors, genetic factors that aren't able to cause the disease but can increase your chance of getting the disease. But also there are non-genetic risk factors as well. And trying to identify those in the New Zealand context is where our epidemiology research program is now moving to. So we have a new study, and it's called the New Zealand Parkinson's Environment and Gene Study, or we just like to call it PEGS for short. It aims to recruit 500 people with Parkinson's disease and 500 neurologically healthy controls. We will be collecting extensive information about any potential risk factors that they have been exposed to during their life. We will also be collecting DNA to do genetic analyses. We hope that we are going to be able to characterise those genetic and non-genetic factors that are driving the occurrence of Parkinson's in New Zealand, and that information will feed back into our interpretation of our previous research that I've presented here tonight. So our recruitment for people with Parkinson's began yesterday with a mail out to people in the Otago region to start with, and our controls will be randomly selected from the electoral roll. So if you find yourself getting a letter of invitation from us, probably sometime next year, to be a control participant, please do consider it, and we would be very grateful if you agreed to join us. And if you have Parkinson's and you would like to take part, please feel free to call us. or contact us at NZBRI, or you can shoulder tap us after this talk. So thank you for your time.